I really do believe that if we don't take care of ourselves or better ourselves, then, we're missing the opportunity for being present in life. This opportunity came along to work with a Heroic Hearts project. It coincided with some of the work that I've been doing in the addiction recovery field, specifically looking at harm reduction and ways of helping people with substance abuse issues or substance misuse issues to recover. And psychedelics certainly offered an opportunity for individuals to do that. So it was just natural that I would want to be involved with an organization that was doing the work, not only to help veterans lift themselves up and out of addiction and behaviors that really weren't helping them in their life, but also be an advocate for legalization and normalization for these very powerful substances that really can help individuals reset, reboot, and reframe their mind and their experience.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Psychedelic Conversations podcast. I have with me Keith Fiveson. Is that correct, Keith? Fiveson?
Oh, yeah, like the number 5, son. Yeah.
Fiveson. Welcome. It's so amazing to have you with us.
Thanks. It's amazing to be here with you. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. So just to give you a bit of a context to our listeners, what you do and who you are. So you are a mindfulness CX, we'll go into the things that you are offering and doing. So
sure.
Mindfulness experience, ME coach, which I'm interested to find out more, consultant, health and wellness education on mindful leadership, author, podcaster, keynote speaker on mindfulness experience, emotional intelligence, and presence-based leadership. That's really, really interesting, which we will go into that as well.
Right.
You are also the ambassador for the Heroic Hearts project in the US.
Right. Yeah, I'm one of the ambassadors. There's a few of them, and the Heroic Hearts project is a nonprofit 501c3 that really works with veterans who are coming back or are already here, but are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder or who have ongoing stress issues that are really quite, explicit.
Mm-hmm. How did you get involved, and what was the affiliation? What was the drive behind it that you found them?
Sure. I'm a vet myself, and I have been diagnosed with PTSD, not necessarily because of any kind of wartime issues. I was a part of the ballistic missile defense communications activity. I went in when I was 18 years old, and I had a pretty rough childhood, a very dysfunctional family system, and I think that's where I got a lot of my PTSD from that, as well as from just life experiences. But going through the Army, it was one of my best experiences in my life. Quite frankly, I needed the rigor, I needed the structure, and there are a lot of things that came out of it, a career, a sense of it. I got education, I got the benefits, I got all the things that you can imagine, certainly the ability to step up, and they gave me a hand up, rather than a handout. So I was very fortunate that way. And as an older guy, I retired from the corporate world, and I got very much involved in working in the recovery community as a credentialed alcohol and substance abuse counselor, as well as a addiction recovery coach, and working with individuals. And I have a family system, as I said, where my mother was a victim of abuse, and she had herself some alcohol misuse issues, died very early at 51 years old. And so at this particular point in my life, it's about 6 years ago, back in 2016, I guess, I retired from the corporate world and just thought, along the way, I did a lot of other certifications, if you will. I guess I have a certification addiction. But I really do believe that if we don't take care of ourselves or better ourselves, then we're missing the opportunity for being present in life. So this opportunity came along to work with a Heroic Hearts project. It coincided with some of the work that I've been doing in the addiction recovery field, specifically looking at harm reduction and ways of helping people with substance abuse issues or substance misuse issues to recover. And psychedelics certainly offered an opportunity for individuals to do that. And in the US, the psychedelics community or psychedelics has been very lifted up. It's been lifted up through both the Democrats and the Republicans in the US. So it was just natural that I would want to be involved with an organization that was doing the work, not only to help veterans lift themselves up and out of, addiction and behaviors that really weren't helping them in their life, but also be an advocate for legalization and, normalization for these very powerful substances that really can help individuals reset, reboot, and reframe their mind and their experience.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Kev. Mm-hmm. As somebody who's living in the US and also being involved in this kind of deep work, what are your thoughts and what are your observations around this new psychedelic renaissance concept? Things are changing. I see, I think many states in the US are doing great work in decriminalization. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts? What are you seeing? This is my favorite question lately. What are your observations? That would be nice to hear.
Well, I think Rick Doblin over at MAPS has done an excellent job, given his background, his education at Harvard, and his research as a 501c3, and getting a lot of funding from the Republicans on the right side of the issue. And we see a lot of, recently there's been some stories about the GoDaddy CEO, who's also a vet, and a lot of other vets who are really going ahead and supporting this. So I think the Veterans Administration and the, the red, white, and blue, salute and wave the flag is really been very helpful in pushing the issues forward. My primary concern, being a boomer and being someone who came out of the 60s and had his first LSD experience when I was, I guess I was 16 years old, and it really did change my mindset and changed a lot of my trajectory. My primary concern is that it goes down, or it doesn't go down the same road that cannabis has gone down as a recreational tool. I think that you probably can't help it from going down that road because there is a big underground culture right now. And there is that opportunity for people, if they don't have to go to a clinic, if they don't have to deal with a doctor, if they don't have to deal with insurance, why in the world would I bother going to, see someone and pay so much money? And we do have a very big underground culture in the cannabis area right now. But I think the opportunity to use these substances as a way to help individuals deal with depression, deal with alcoholism, and then, it's setting the journey itself, and then the integration opportunities, the intention, the integration opportunities. I think that really at the end of the day, if there are people and or tools that are out there, or communities, even better, that are out there that can help these individuals go ahead and lift themselves up and out of the pit of depression, and really help them to see and reframe the world in a better way, then I have no doubt. We're already starting to see legalization of psilocybin in Oregon and in Colorado, and I just read something recently that we'll probably see something in terms of legalization of psilocybin and MDMA. Certainly, Rick Doblin believes it will happen by the end of next year. So, and there's a big money lobby that's helping to push that. That's the good news, but it's also the bad news in some way, because what we don't want to have happen is we don't want to have the intention, the sacred intention, the container of why we're using it. And that goes back to the original idea of recreation. It's you can use it, sure, you can go to, we don't want the reemergence of the rave culture to be all consuming. I lived through the Rockefeller laws back in the 60s and 70s, and quite honestly, if you were caught with a joint, you went to prison. That's the kind of thing that you dealt with. And we could see how that could backlash. You go so far, and then something happens. And back in the day, it was Art Linkletter who blamed LSD for his daughter's death, and that became a very big rallying point to go ahead and make it illegal and make it something that was extremely bad. So we really want to, I think this time, really mark and measure and manage the process going forward.
Yeah, that's profound. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's really amazing to listen to your observations, because you've been in this from the beginning, taking LSD at the age of 16. I can't even comprehend this. There's two things I wanted to, two threads I wanted to bring in. One, is it true that, I heard this from many people, anyone who has, whether it's recreational, accidental, creative, doesn't matter how, if they have encountered psychedelic substances, their trajectory of life changes drastically. Do you believe in that? Their path they will be taking. Not saying it always positive, but it really does impact them in some way. It impacts the individuals in some way. Would you agree so?
Well, what we're missing here is that, throughout history, groups, cultures, religions, spiritual traditions, there's always been a rite of passage. There's been a process for individuals to go ahead and open up the lens and the aperture of their mind to go ahead and recognize that there are broader areas of life that they can go on the hero's journey, as I like to call it. That they can wake up and they can suddenly see that there is a bigger world out there, and there are greater challenges to deal with rather than the me, my, and mine. And I think what the psychedelics do, certainly within the right context and the right framework and the right intention, is they help the individual to open up and to create new neural pathways within the brain to connect to drop out of the default mode network of the brain, the referential judgmental side of the brain that really has that sort of ego characteristic to it of me, my, and mine, and really interconnect to the broader spectrum of reality. And reality is not man-made. And reality is the natural world of, the plants, the trees, the water, earth, water, fire, air, really in a very characteristic way, really make up what reality is. And what we've done is we've taken all that stuff and we've molded it. We've put like clay, we've created these structures and these things that we then call reality. And that is not like like it's like a beehive. We're in the hive, but we're not in the reality of what is surrounding the hive. That is, I think, what psychedelics help to do. They help you to drop away from the hive. Sort of like that scene in The Matrix where Keanu Reeves kind of wakes up out of the pod, and he opens up the pod and he disconnects his symbiotic fluids, and he wakes up to what the reality is. And of course, reality is not necessarily man-made. It's something that is dirty. It is something that we can connect with, that we can plant into. We can go ahead and smell. We can go ahead and really weave ourselves in. It's not to say that what we've created from a man-made viewpoint in that hive is bad. It's both and, right? There is that ability to realize that we can create our reality, that reality doesn't create us, or the man-made stuff doesn't create us, but we create the man-made stuff, and we do it through our interconnection with the natural world. And that is the important thing, to recognize where we're getting our energies from. And I think psychedelics sort of breaks that open, and it cracks open our perceptions and gives us a broader perception that we are greater than we think we are, and we can leave the hive and go on the grand adventure of life, and then come back and be normal and natural, rather than be like deal with the facade that perhaps was thrown on us, or a strip that was thrown on us. So I feel like I'm just going on and on. So let me stop.
That's wonderful. I really love that. There is a really amazing quote that I love. Let me see if I can recall. It is to do with the psychedelics, how they work. There's two things actually I wanted to bring, because it really is. It works well with what you have just shared with us. Mm-hmm. One of them is mature psychedelic work is as much about this enchantment than it is about enchantment. I love that. It's very different. And the reason I share this is because I think it's really important to understand that we have given meaning and context to psychedelic work within the mental health frame, within the trauma work frame, which I advocate for. Mm-hmm. This is not to say I dismiss everything else around it, or that I don't see that the psychedelic work is beyond anything we can contextualize. So I get that. And I feel like the education part is so critical, but at the same time, if somebody is not ready for this enchantment, or at least there's another quote that I couldn't find, but it goes something along these lines. It says, the real authentic psychedelic work is about breaking down the confined reality that we live in, along those lines. And I do see that. I do see and I do feel that psychedelic work is beyond anything we can contextualize in and comprehend. However, lately, with the psychedelic renaissance movement, with all these, like you said, companies coming in because there's money in it now, we almost want to kind of refine it under mental health umbrella. Maybe this is a good thing. I think Rick Doblin said that, let it be. If this is the way that it's going to come back to our, integrate into society again, then it may well be the mental health approach. But when we speak on a very in-depth level, we do know that psychedelic substances are not just limited to mental health work. And, one of the things that I struggle and I have challenges with leading, as you already know, we do lead microdosing programs in group settings. One of our biggest challenge is to educate the participant to let go of the stigma, let go of this idea that these are party drugs, let go of the idea that these are just limited to recreational use. Mm-hmm. Again, there's no negativity here about the recreational use. Mm-hmm. Not to dismiss it. It can be very helpful if it's in the right setting. Mm-hmm. However, this would be our biggest challenge, that people have all kinds of stigmatized viewpoints or negativity, sensitivity around these substances. But I love the neo context because these are not just limited to that. Mm-hmm. I love that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is I wanted to talk to you about, would you also say, this is about my previous question about your psychedelic affiliation or use back in the day as a young man, would you say it influenced what you are doing right now in terms of mindfulness teachings, leadership teachings, all of these? Mm-hmm. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, without question. I think along the way, you had sort of done the introduction, and, I was involved with the rise of the internet. I basically worked with a fellow by the name of Vint Cerf at MCI. And when I had my psychedelic trips, I'll go back further before that. When I had my psychedelic trips, I was 16. I wound up just barely finishing up high school the last year, and I left home. I wound up, getting into a little bit of a row with my parents at the time, and I wound up living on a hippie commune. I eventually wound up joining the army, but I did these psychedelic trips when I was living on a hippie commune. I did about 5, 6 LSD trips, and they were all very Timothy Leary kind of setting, intention, writing it out, and so on and so forth. And I had some real awakenings in terms of, who I was and what I wanted to do and what I aspired to do in the world, how I wanted to breathe myself into the world. And I wound up, after one psychedelic trip, I wound up actually joining the Army. And that was, I think I took my examination and all that. I think I was still coming down from my trip. It was within about 3 days within the trip. And I wound up getting into the communications field. So the impact of psychedelics on my life, you could say, certainly from that point, I never regretted that. It was the best move I ever made. And that really formed the basis of my entry into telecommunications, into communications, into working with people, and into the whole area of customer experience, which is about call centers, helping individuals answer the phone, have a communication, I wanted to get into radio, but I couldn't. There weren't many radio jobs, but now here we are, we're on a podcast. So I guess I'm doing radio now, kind of. But the point being is that it did influence me. I got into the communications field. I wound up very, very stressed, though. I had lots of trauma, and I burned through 2 marriages. And, I wound up at a point in my life where I became a yoga teacher. I wound up seeking yoga and meditation. This is back in 93, 94. I wound up traveling. I was in Thailand. I did Taoist esoteric yoga and stuff like that. But the fast forward after I've been in a wonderful relationship now we just celebrated our 25th year of marriage, and been with my wife for 28 years. But I've been practicing mindfulness and meditation for all this time. I also did a lot of other things. One of the things I know is that the customer experience area is really about employee experience, stress, overload, the ability to reboot, reset, reframe, And from my experience with mindfulness and breath and the ability to just kind of get to the moment, get where are you right now? Is everything okay at this moment? So that's how I use mindfulness, and that's how I use the breath work in working with organizations to help individuals to reboot, reset, reframe, to get calm, to get clear, to get connected. And that's on the corporate side of things, and to really look at rehabilitation within the organization, because companies need to be rehabilitated. You know, the old structures don't work anymore. And with the individual work, that's really the me work, you know, the mindfulness experience work. How do I, as an individual, deal with people, places, and things? And how do I go ahead and reboot, reframe my own habits? You know, am I doing things habitually that aren't good for me? Or am I doing things that don't pay the rent? You know, and how am I focusing my mind in a way that really allows me to become the person I want to be, a better person, hopefully. You know, and then the mindfulness-based interventions around psychedelics are really now looking at incorporating the breath work and, you know, looking at the studies that are out there to really look at breath as really the tool that allows us to aspire, to inspire, to perspire, to respire. I use that word. I use these words all. They sound the same because spire, S-P-I-R, spire is a Latin root word for breath. And, you know, it's a wonderful word because we see it in spirit, we see it in transpire, we see it in our daily lives everywhere. So the idea of using breath work and the idea of using presence as a state of where am I now? Am I breathing? Being aware of what I'm breathing into the world through my thoughts, through my words, through my deeds. You know, that's the whole idea of being able to transcend the dogma, the, you know, again, the matrix kind of concept, and really create the people, you know, the person that we want to be. And I think the psychedelics are the next phase of doing that in a way that allows us to transform the person, you know, not transform, I would say rip away, just like, you know, you've described, or as I, you know, visualized in the Neo Matrix as he opens up his pod, you know, rip away the constructs or the tubes or the dogmas or the stories that really have been shifted on us or laid upon us, and really come to a point where we come to recognize our true being, which is a sacred, you know, human being. That's a spirit having a human experience. So why don't we create the experience we want?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And what I would like to bring our attention to is the psychedelics are being the catalyst for the rites of passages. You know, the rites of passage is something I love talking about. And of course, you know, when we do work with the trauma-informed approach in psychedelic work, sometimes it takes time to get to the next level, not like level, but next phase of the work. And the reason I say this, and the reason I mention, is that somehow intellectually we understand that we create our reality. Intellectually we get it. We understand how our energy works and how it flows through, and all of that is wonderful and it's powerful and it sounds true. I think
There's
all
a
humans.
button there. I hear a butt coming. What?
Yeah, the butt is coming, and like all of us, like we read the book, we've been to the workshops where we kind of had those glimpses of connecting and feeling, and you know, the unity consciousness. All of that, it's a beautiful understanding. However, I find that in the field that I am in, somehow we've been wired differently if we grow up in hostile environments that don't nurture, help us, you know, become autonomous or self-agent individuals, which means then the whole thing carries on into our adult life, where the whole society and environment is conditioned to keep us in that codependency. So I feel like one of the biggest challenges in humans right now, especially working with psychedelics, since it's our subject, is the trust issue. They don't trust the process of psychedelics, taking them through the rites of passage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The recognition, the realization of that rites of passage wasn't meant to be all comfortable. Mm-hmm. And I have this concept of separation, being skinned alive, and separation. I know these are, I should do a little warning actually, if people are impressionable and watching this little,
Well, you mean it metaphorically, you're not literal,
yeah.
I mean, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So for
me,
me,
your old skin, like the snake shedding its old skin and coming into a new body, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. So for me, the understanding of the rites of passage is is about cracking open and shedding, and the separation process. Separation meaning not to separate as an individual, but separating from this codependency, the trauma wiring, and all of those things that limit us in understanding and connecting fully into that unity consciousness. So the trust piece, why is it so difficult to trust the process? And in the West, we have an issue, or we have challenges understanding the rites of passages. But in some esoteric philosophies, in ancient teachings and Eastern philosophies, somehow rites of passage is almost integrated in everyone's life. At least they know so much more about it.
Well, I mean, I'll give you my perspective.
Yes, please.
My perspective is we are living within. We were born into a sewer of collective trauma, and the collective trauma is implicit, explicit, and it repeats itself. And it is something that is somewhat hardwired into the system, that if we aren't, or if we're somehow not on the treadmill of the capitalistic, treadmill, or the idea of going to school, listen to mom and dad, going ahead and getting the education. All of those things are very good. There's nothing wrong with that. But with the idea of not being enough, the idea of somehow that we're not worthy of, and it's also hardwired into the dogma, into the religious context of the original sin, of that we are born with sin, that somehow we're not good enough, we've missed the mark as human beings, that somehow if we just bow down at the altar to the old emperor, the Holy Roman Empire, that somehow we will be better people if we're subservient and we don't recognize that we ourselves are capable of creating our own destinies, that somehow we've outsourced our destiny to a God that is not of us or in us, but is somehow that we have to bow down to and pray to. Now, I'm not saying any of those things are necessarily bad, because different people, different strokes for different folks. And if you're in that system, that is the way the system works. However, if you are traumatized by the system, and we're dealing certainly in the US, and I think other areas of the world, we are dealing with a system that is, the US is based on a system of slavery, a system of carnage. We have, wiped out the indigenous people. The US is a system that has, really done a terrible job in terms of racism. It's based on racism and slavery. So there are some very rooted issues, some traumatic issues that keep repeating themselves again and again and again and again. And whether or not that's through war, or whether or not that's through capitalist imperialism, or whether or not that's through some sort of system, it sustains itself and it repeats itself. And the problem is, when you go ahead and you say to someone, you can break out of that, you can go ahead and tear off your chains, your psychological, psychic chains, and you can alter your ego. You can put your ego at the altar, and you can transform and metamorphosis from the caterpillar to the butterfly, from, shed your skin. It freaks people out. And I would say that the methodologies that have helped to fortify that with psychedelics have been also, they have been, whether or not it's the just say no through the Reagan years or the Nixon years or the Rockefeller years, they have been stigmatized to the point that individuals are afraid in some respects. So I do think that the new renaissance is helpful because, Rick Doblin has ushered through the FDA trials. He's done it just like every other drug, looking at every other drug in trial. And what we've seen now is that, individuals, specifically, there was just a group over in Pennsylvania. We're looking to go ahead and legalize even further, just go ahead and accelerate the process. People who were on 10 drugs, Prozac and everything else under the sun, feeling just absolutely terrible, or who had alcohol issues, or who had substance abuse, or smoking, looking at smoking as a smoking cessation. The whole idea of being able to use psychedelics and to be able to shed that off and to reboot, reframe, reset their lives in a way that help them to be, happy with who they are. I mean, that's revolutionary, and it's frightening. Anything that is revolutionary is frightening to people because they don't necessarily know what's on the other side.
Wow, that's very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Would you say that I have this saying that psychedelic substances are a calling for those who are intense people. They are intense in their character, intense in experienced trauma. They carry a lot of stuff that is not light compared to many people. I don't say this to separate and dismiss some people who are functioning, because I have a friend, he says he studied psychoanalysis for many, many years, and he says we are all functioning neurotics, but we just fall on a different spectrum. Mm-hmm. So I understand that, but somehow, Keith, that when the life throws at us the curveball that comes in, sometimes in terminal illness, sometimes in hitting the rock bottom, sometimes in going into the emergency room with alcohol overdose or other harmful drugs overdose, somehow there is a moment where we kind of accept the rites of passage, accept the journey, accept the opening, accept the metamorphosis. Mm-hmm. If you could please speak to that, and if you don't mind, I know you have a very profound story with this. Maybe if you feel called to share it, or it's up to you. But
sure. I think the profound story you're talking about is I'm a 2-time cancer survivor.
Yeah.
And I think that when you look at death, when you come to that point in the road where you have that life moment, where you kind of face your own mortality, and you recognize the fact that you're not going to be around forever, that this is not a dress rehearsal, that life is meant for the living, and I better get busy because now is now, and it's not going to happen unless I make it happen. No one is going to give me, no one's going to go ahead and show me how to live my own life. If I tell individuals, this is who I am and this is what I do, they're not going to argue with me. So what's your story? And are you perpetuating that story through being a victim or being a victor? Are you the victim of your own story, or are you the victor? Are you the hero of your own story? And are you going on that hero's journey that we talked about? Are you waking up from the land of sleep? And are you ready to go on the adventure to, talk to the mentor, talk to your coach, and then go into the belly of the whale? Because that is really where you get to come face to face with your own mortality. You get to come face to face and have that dark night of the soul that you talk about, that intensity of that, hey, no one's going to save me unless I save myself. So I do think that there is a level of waking up. I do think that there is a level of having life slap you across the face and say, hey, what are you doing? Where are you going? How are you talking to yourself? I have a saying that, if anyone talked to me the way I talk to myself, I'd have them arrested. So, I think that's the question. How are you talking to yourself, and what are you focusing on to go ahead and, what you think about, you bring about, what you focus on, you go ahead and you attune to, and you put the energy on. So that's actually how you live. And I think the cancer for me in my life was really very much around coming out of a victim, a victim mentality, that somehow, life was happening to me, that I wasn't creating the life that I wanted. So, I do think that the psychedelics helped me to get to one stage. I think the breathing and the cancer and the changing of the diet. I have 8 strategies in my book, The Mindfulness Experience, which are 8 strategies to live life now. And they are, what are you putting? And these are, things that we can talk about in terms of what pays rent, what doesn't pay rent, what destroys the house. So what do you, and the 8 strategies are the internal strategies, the inside out strategies of the mind, the body, the spirit. In other words, the belief system that you have internally, the food that you put in your body, and the ability to sleep. And all of those things really revolve around this word spirit or breathe it, so that what we do is we give life to our own inner workings through the mind, the body, the spirit, the food, and the sleep, the ability to recharge. And it's not necessarily it's sleep, it's also taking these mindfulness experience moments, these me moments, right? And then how does that relate to, once we have that, we get inspired, and how does that relate to what we're doing in the world, the outside in stuff, our relationships to people, places, and things, our ability to look at our environment. Are we putting things away? Are we putting plants? Do we have lights? Do we have colors? What are we doing in our own internal environment? And then what are we doing in the world? How are we bringing that into the world? And then aspirations. Are we rechecking ourselves, rebooting, reframing, and resetting, reframing our own aspirations? Because I always like to say people are verbs. We're not nouns. Nouns are sort of static. People are verbs. We're always in motion. We're always breathing. We're always becoming. So how are we becoming, or are we static? And are we breathing life into our own dreams, our hopes, and our visions for the future? And that's not only about me, it's about me, we, and us, right? Because we're always in relationship to something, not only ourselves, unless you're a hermit living in a cave somewhere. So, that's, I don't know if I answered, I feel like I meandered a bit on your question, but I think that's, I think I answered it and then some, right?
That's wonderful. That's very, very, very powerful. Thank you so much. And one of the things that I'm observing all the time is, as I said, not everybody who has gone through this big experience that confronts their mortality or their existence or shakes their world changes or open up, like I said, because there is this part of us that can dissociate, give up even, and also numb ourselves, right? That's the truth. But on a general level, I see that people who have gone through that deeper experiences are much more open to deeper work with psychedelic substances. And then people who come to us with intention to work on flow states, focus, clarity and motivation, and people who are not really perceiving any sort of dark or negative experiences in their lives, they have a stronger boundary, stronger resistance, and stronger kind of, they dismiss what these substances can do, and all those things. I don't know if I'm making sense.
You're making perfect sense. So I think what you're saying is that there are people who sort of succumb to or sort of succumb to the story of their lives as victims, right? And then what they do is they drink, drug, eat, sex, spend. They sort of go down the rabbit hole, and many of them don't come back. I talked about my mother, who was traumatized as a young girl, and went through life and had alcohol issues for a large part of her life. There are people that just don't come back, and what they wind up doing is they don't seek help. They don't go ahead and say, hey, I gotta go ahead and save myself because no one's coming in to save me. So, and then there are others who say, no effing way. I'm going to change this. I'm not going to let life piss on me. I'm going to go ahead and, change this, and I'm going to shake it off and step up, and those are the people I think that who have looked for help, and in many cases haven't found it because the old drugs, these, SRIs don't work. There are issues that have happened. They're looking to change, but they just don't know how to change because they haven't stepped out of themselves. They haven't stepped out of their own, the mind that created the problem is not the same mind that can fix the problem. So how do I get out of my mind? How do I change my mind? As Rick Pollan would say, how do I change my mind, reboot, reset, reframe, and do something different? So that's where I think the psychedelics really are very powerful, because they do give you the opportunity to change your mind, because you're not looking at the same old thinking, stinking thinking. You're changing your mind, and you're rebooting, reframing, and resetting, your experience. And I think that's very powerful.
I love that. And there is one last thing I wanted to mention, that this is our inside talk with one of my therapist friends. We always say that people won't change until the pain is enough. They have to go through. This is not true for everyone, because it's about the perception. How do we perceive that pain? And when does it get too much for us to take action, right? Everyone's different. And they, their system can dump a whole lot of opioids, organic biochemicals that can, dissociate and not really feel and think those things and take action. That's true also. But in most cases, people who actually go through some excruciating, painful experiences, they are much more humble, open, and ready to, like you said, change their mind with different approaches.
Well, I think so. And I think one of the other things that I just want to applaud you for doing, you've created a magnificent community, and what we know is that the problem is not necessarily addiction or misuse or all of those other things. It's really about connection, and the ability to connect with ourselves and with others, and do that in community is really probably the most powerful thing that we can have in our lives. We're born for connection, right? So the ability to do that, and to do it in a way that allows us to normalize our trauma, to normalize our stigmas, the issues or the stuff that's been thrown on us. I can't think of anything that's more powerful than that, because really what it allows us to do then is to shed off the old skin and to step into a new light or a new way of being. So, thank you for the work that you've been doing. I think it's just magnificent. And I really deeply appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and to share the space.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for your feedback. Highly appreciate it. Thank you. We will be adding your link to your book and some of your work in the show notes. But before we say goodbye and let you go, Keith, this has been such a pleasure, and I'm sure we'll have you back again very soon for another part 2 or another conversation. So just to kind of follow your work, and I've been enjoying your work on LinkedIn. This is how we met. I've been following, and I'm also lined up some articles that you've been writing. So really looking forward to those as well. Before we let you go, last words of wisdom, what would you like to share with our community?
I think the main thing is that, to really understand that, what you focus is the food, what we focus on and what we think about, we bring about. So, the real question is, using, the idea of the idea of spirit, how do we inspire? How do we aspire into the world? Are we conspiring or expiring in terms of the things that we're thinking about or breathing into our lives? So, just think about that, your breath. Where are you now? And what are you breathing into the world? And are you the victor or are you the victim? And if you're the victim, how can you change that story, and how can you breathe life into a new story by focusing in on something that is different, and or rewiring, through talk, through community, through whether or not it's through psychedelics or intention. Writing is a big one as well. So, just take the time, get to know who you are, work from the inside out, and then breathe yourself into the world in terms of your aspirations, because this is not a dress rehearsal. This is your life. And if you're not busy, the old Bob Dylan saying, he who's not busy being born is busy dying. So, we have to do that every day and every breath.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much for your
welcome.
wisdom, for your teachings today. Really appreciate it. And congratulations on the 20 plus relationship,
thank you.
With your wife. So amazing to hear this. And we'll follow your work. And thank you for doing all that you do also. Really appreciate it.
I look forward to circling back with you, Susan. You're really quite a bright light, and I'm really honored and have a real pleasure knowing you. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Please do get in touch with me or Keith if you are drawn to his wisdom and his work. He's on LinkedIn. He's everywhere. We will be linking all of his contacts in the show notes. And thank you so much again for tuning in. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye for now. Much love. Thank you so much for joining us. Psychedelic Conversations podcast is designed to educate, inform, and expand awareness. For more information, please head over to psychedelicconversations.com. You can also share with your friends or leave a review so that we can reach more people. You can also join us in our private Facebook group to keep the conversation going. This show is for information purposes only, and it is not intended to provide mental health or medical advice. Thanks for listening.